Uh, what do we mean when we call a game immersive? When people talk about immersive game worlds, they always mention the likes of Fallout or Elder Scrolls, which, while they are amazing games set in amazing and rich worlds, I've never been able to get myself immersed in them. There's always been a glaring difference between what is explained and taught to us in the lore and what is actually shown in game. Diamond City in Fallout 4 is described as being the great green jewel of the Commonwealth, yet when we arrive there, it doesn't feel that much grander or impressive than any of the other settlements and towns we have come across in the game. This same issue appears to Fallout New Vegas, but to a lesser degree. In Skyrim, we are told the country is being torn apart by a civil war, and yet, other than NPC dialogue and a few quests and encounters, we see little sign of this. And then there are cities we visit that feel like literally more than small towns with only a few inhabitants. Now, no hate to those games, they are some of my favorite games of all time, and those discrepancies are clear result of technical limitations being unable to make the cities as large as they should be or are described as being. Let's talk about Stalker, When it comes to immersion, I personally think Stalker really nailed it. The game mode is gritty, dark, truly unforgiving, where everyone might turn out to be your worst enemy, including in-game people, monsters, natural surroundings themselves. And then you have those safe moments when you find a bunch of neutral stalkers in the waste sitting around a fire playing harmonicas and singing in Russian, and flashing the flashlights to check whether there is any danger in the dark. Dynamic world which leads to so many stories. Despite the game being so old, the first one it has so much potential and elements that randomly mix and sometimes create unforgettable in-game stories. My first game, I was thrown into it, and after exploring for a while and starting to feel good about myself because I found a shotgun, suddenly night came and it was pitch black. Then I heard dogs barking. Then I heard dogs barking. Aggressive, badass evil, radiated beast dogs. I crawled into a corner of some half-assed sturdy remains of what used to be a house and hid. I heard shooting, growling shrieks somewhere in the dark in the distance, and when it all quieted down, I rised up only to face another figure in the same house, who has been there for God knows how long. He shot me down instantly. It was a bandit. Now, in Stalker Core of Pripyat, I hope I said that right. Numerous times I've seen animals hunting and then dragging the corpse back to their lair, or you can be just wandering around and a group of stalkers who get attacked by dogs. It's a random non-scripted event. Or the other time I was walking through a zone and saw two groups of stalkers, one neutral and one friendly. I went towards them to trade, but as soon as I came close, the two groups started shooting at each other. One group was bandits. One friendly stalker dead, and I see that the bandit goes towards the left friendly stalker who's lying on the ground dying. He goes he goes to him, talks about sorry but gotta finish our business with his pistol drawn out. I quickly kill the bandits and give a mad kit to the friendly stalker. He gets up, thanks me, and starts looting the bandit, picks up a gun and goes to moan his friend. This was a wonderful thing. Sometimes you can see stalkers around anomalies trying to collect artifacts. Sometimes they manage to do it, but sometimes they get caught and die. The world is living, breathing thing in those games, and you're not the centerpiece. You're just another stalker with your own goals. When I played Shadow of Chernobyl, lethal lethality. Okay, I'm sorry, my pronunciation sucks, but okay, lethality was high in both directions. If you could get a clean line of fire on a target, you could drop them with a well-placed burst, but if you couldn't find cover, you were in just as much danger. Later in the game, this becomes even more pronounced as the option had to choose between a scoped gun that was useful at range or a powerful gun with lots of ammo that you had to get much closer to use. There was a bit of hunger. There was a bit of a hunger aspect though. That was minimum. You had to eat, but enemies dropped so much bread and sausage that starvation wasn't really a big deal. Radiation was a bigger concern. Anti-raid was expensive and vodka was heavy. Usually radiation wasn't a problem, but some extremely lucrative catches of gear, especially in the early game, were in zones of intense radiation that required both radiation resistance gear, artifacts, and anti-rad to safely loot. Anomalies were terrifying. If you walked into them unknowingly, you had to keep your eyes peeled for areas of slightly distorted air because those things would seriously mess you up. Weight and equipment condition was a big concern. You couldn't just carry 20,000 rounds for your machine gun and go spray and pray. If you carried a large amount of ammo, you didn't have room to loot the more valuable artifacts, medkits, and other gear, so you usually wound up leaving stashes everywhere to restock or make multiple trips to sell to town. Sometimes you'd find incredible gear like guns that weighed half as much or rare weapons that used common ammo, but if you used them too much, they fell apart, so you had to ration the best stuff for when you really needed it. The world felt desolate. You had a solid sense that civilization didn't mean anything here, and outside of a few specific safe zones, duty or freedom camps, depending on which you sided with, any group of humanoids that you saw from a distance had to be approached with caution. What creatures were dangerous? Even the blind dogs could be a threat in packs, and the nastier monsters that took multiple hits to kill were terrifying. Don't even get me started on the psychic monsters, 'cause I hated those with a personal passion. Metroid Prime, I know this one's going to be a weird, but Metroid Prime is the absolute gold standard of immersion and inspired many of the other games we see today. The most basic cornerstone of everything it builds off is its UI and HUD. You are inside, okay, I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly, Samus helmet. Samus? I hope I said it right. You are inside Samu's helmet. You see all her systems integrated into your field of vision, exactly as she does. The sound design of all these little mechanical details and cues is subtle yet incredibly well done. Everyone remembers the first time you're in an intense fight and you hit a point blank charge shot, and you see Samu's eyes reflect in a vision for an instant. A stark contrast that for a second reminds you that you're not the one inside this visor, but by doing so only serves to further articulate just how much you had convinced yourself you were, and how quickly you will lapse back into that feeling. And the fucking scanning, goddamn, the scan visor still remains to this day the coolest implementation of detailed immersive environmental storytelling, and I'm not sure if it will ever be topped. Now, this is further compounded by the control. Compounded by the control? I never thought a game with golden eye controls could age so well, but the use of left trigger as a lock-on button, strafe enable, ensures you don't feel limited by only having one stick to move. And the snapness of it actually makes you feel more like an elite crackshot warrior than the awkward floatness of joystick aiming. In Prime 3 and Trilogy and the Prime Trilogy, they switched things up by adding motion controls to incorporate a hybrid lock-on system, where you are actually aiming the Wii remote like Samus arm cannon. Obviously, motion controls are viewed as kind of an overrated fad, but if you want to talk immersion, it definitely amped things up even further while still working pretty well. It was also a pioneer of incorporating mechanics like gyro-assisted aim that we are beginning to see implemented in games like Breath of the Wild, and in my opinion is the future of non-mouse based shooter control. Okay, now that we have covered the eternal personal aspects of immersion as pertaining to the player character itself, we observe the other side of the membrane, the world, the reality, everything beyond the self. All three Prime games have absolutely spectacular worlds that fully and completely stand the test of time due to the highly creative vector-based shader techniques and specular mapping. Games are, so, games are so often reliant on textures to look detailed or realistic for the time, but with Metroid Prime, you can basically scale that shit up to in resolution you want and it's still gonna blow you away visually, and will in all likelihood continue to look just as good in 10 or 20 years. Beyond just the technological aspect of how the graphics are implemented, though lies the even more important aspect of simply how insanely strong the art design is. The areas are varied and contrasting, some vibrant, some muted, some lush and natural, some overwhelmingly mechanized, some barren and desolate, others teeming with life and sound, and backing it all is a driving and Begging or is a driving legendary soundtrack with music that perfectly fits each area and encounter. For me, Metroid Prime is special. If you value immersion and haven't played these games, you're seriously missing out on a lot. This one is kind of pretty obvious. I mean, I really had a hard time thinking if I should actually add it, but in the end, I thought, why not? Because I enjoyed it, and it's it's Red Dead Redemption 2. To be honest, this game is an absolute masterpiece. Every banner rabbit to each individual town, every random encounter to the meticulous missions, the mud on the carriage walls to the buildings that get constructed as you play, the world of Red Dead Redemption 2 is unlike anything. The map is gigantic but realistically laid out. It never feels like you just magically wound up in the desert or the snowy mountains. Each area feels like it transitions perfectly from the last. Each town feels memorable, what with their own unique soundtracks and atmosphere, and the group camp always feels like home. It's a wood that trumps any other in terms of scope, liveliness, and immersion. Sometimes when you play a game, you wonder why it took so long to make. The opposite is true of Red Dead Redemption 2. It's a living, breathing world that feels like it should be impossible on current hardware. It makes all other open world feel completely devoid of life and like stage play. From the realistic animal hierarchy to the decaying corpses, the ability to speak to any NPC to dynamic weather down to the shocking lack of glitches, the world of Red Dead Redemption 2 is the greatest ever crafted. It does have its problems, but I'm going to mention those in the end. For now, we're starting with the best. Now, the hunting in this game is pretty great. It may seem like too much at the start and you may not understand it at all, but as is the case with the entirety of this game, you can rest assured that it's meticulously designed to the point of blowing your little mind away, or blowing your little mind. You may find yourself frustrated as you try to get that 3-star scroll you need to craft a nice new cap. Eventually you'll realize that you need the Vermint rifle to do so. The hunting in Red Dead Redemption 2 is dependent on the ecosystem, meaning the animals in the game behave like their real-life counterparts. You find beavers by rivers, bears in the mountains, and alligators in the swamp. It isn't enough to just find them either. You have to study them and use just the right weapon to take them out cleanly. Then you skin it and take it back to the trapper or camp, unless of course you lose the pelt or the carcass rots before you get there. It's an incredibly deep and meticulous hunting system, and one that could legit be a game all by itself. The fact that it's just in there, it's worthy of celebration alone, or even an award. Many of the complaints flagged at Red Dead Redemption 2 stemmed from the game's slow pace. Gamers didn't want to endure the slow prologue that introduced the cast while hampering your access to the world. They didn't like the lack of fast travel, that the skinning animation for every animal, that your beard grows in real time, or that the game is just really long. However, I think the pacing is in fact perfect. Unlike most games, the main story never compels you to move forward, nor impetuous to save the princess or such. Instead, it allows you to take the missions at your own pace and still experience the sweeping tale. If you want to hunt animals or find dream catchers for a few hours, the game never nudges you to get back to the main story. When you do return to the story though, it's a scrumptiously paced masterpiece that feels the exact right length. In a world where everyone seeks the instant gratification of Fortnite, Redeemed demands you slow down, stick on some headphones, and play for several hours. The slow burn story makes the highs higher and the lows so crushing, a pace perfectly befitting of a western. Arthur Morgan. For the first few chapters of Red Dead Redemption 2's story, Arthur Morgan seems like a regular by the numbers protagonist. He's rough, takes no shit, and doesn't care for small talk. Yet, as the story unfolds, Arthur blossoms into a diverse, layered character that belays his troubled upbringing and conflicted mind. As you progress through Red Dead Redemption 2, you begin to see Arthur change. The events of the story and his run-ins with characters begins to shape him into the man he is at the end of the game. That evolution is frustrated by his argument later in the game, and that's what makes it so heartbreaking to play. Arthur is a good man deep down, and learning of his illness spurs him to take the most of his final days and works by helping others. What follows is true redemption, and the true development of a character that makes most others seem completely hollow in comparison. Quite frankly, Arthur Morgan is the greatest character in any video game. So, I'm curious what game modes you have experienced that you could truly become immersed in and truly believe in. Comment down below which games you've played which you would say had the best immersion ever experienced. I've told you guys my part, now it's your turn to tell me in the comments. Hope you guys enjoyed the video and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.